This is Dirt Track Speedway. Video highlights from Episode 4, May 24th, 2017, presented by Fast Shafts by Axle Exchange. They're not just fast, they're first. Get a hold of Pat Fagan and the crew, fastshafts.com. So coming up on tonight's show for us tonight, Heat Races is going to be talking about some rain-out fun. I asked for everyone to share some of their rain-out activities, some interesting ones that came up this particular weekend. Hey, Maine, tonight, I've been talking and corresponding with a couple of sanctioning bodies, a couple of chassis builders about chassis safety. And then before we leave tonight, I think we ought to salute those fallen heroes. It is Memorial Day weekend, after all, and we'll talk more about that as well. So with our Heat Races tonight, usually if you're new to the show, Heat Races, we talk about some accomplishments over the weekend, maybe a win or an accomplishment that doesn't have to do with the win. Nevertheless, still something noteworthy. But unfortunately, Mother Nature rained us out, so we were stuck with, rain-out fun at the shops. Now, I'll start off with Tim Current and the Aristocrats had another one of their racing parties during a rain-out, and they always look like they have a great time. And they did share a picture with me, and it looked like the Aristocrats, induced by some liquid refreshment, decided to draw on Timmy's car. And I don't know, it was Van Gogh-esque. I really couldn't describe it, but I think they were trying to draw the statue of David, and I'll just leave it at that. This is what we did at the Doren Sports Bar and Grill. We pulled out the movie Six Pack, and Tripp and I had a great time while having a six-pack. No drawings of David, though, I will admit that. Ben Seaman, who got his first IMCA late model win of his career last weekend, was pouting. That's what he put on there, pouting, and you can see him with the fat lip there, and Ben wanted to go racing and capitalize on that energy. Hopefully, Ben, you still got some energy coming into this weekend. Plenty of opportunities for the late models, including the Deary Brothers Summer Series race, which we'll talk about coming up. Jason Reeves, via Facebook, shared that he was driving a bus full of, quote, alcohol drinking partners. Again, last time we had the rain-out party, we discussed that there was apparently a theme with rain-out parties. The nice thing about driving a bus full of alcohol drinking partiers is that they usually tip pretty well. So hopefully Jason got a good tip by the end of the night. Charlie McKenna sent a text, and I thought this was really interesting. Went to the horse races with a fellow late model driver. Saw a few horses get claimed. I didn't know that was the thing. I thought he was kidding at first, and then he said, I wonder if that makes for any hard feelings at the stables like it does in the pits. So apparently it was a real thing. I had no idea you could claim a horse. I wonder what kind of money you got to roll in your pocket on that one. Anyway, fascinating to see the similarities and differences between the sports. Broke even on the night, so I guess that would be considered a win. And on Sunday night, started working on this weekend. I think I mentioned this before, but my son Chase is graduating this weekend, so it's a big deal at the Doren Sports Bar and Grill. And started putting together a bunch of old pictures with new pictures, and putting on a video collage for his graduation party coming up in a couple of weeks. And I shared that I was going to share this with a few people, and they said, he's going to kill you. I thought it was only fair. There's been times he's done a few things that I've wanted to, quote, kill him. This is my way of just getting even. I'll post it up on YouTube after a bit in case you do want to see it. But that was some of the weekend fun that we had during rainouts. Aerial coverage tonight being brought to you by Tush Beer, the premium beer of Artifice Speedway, which is what you're looking at right now. When you get thirsty, just go out and grab a Tush. Tush Beer. Some new additions you can see there. The grandstands has been full, so they added a small little bleacher section there. In fact, a new grandstand is going to be coming in the next week or so, and also a couple of new billboards there. You can see the Dirt Track Speedway and Fast Shafts as well. And we're going to be having a race here soon, the first ever Fast Shafts Invitational, where a driver out in the state of Iowa has a chance to win a drive shaft, thanks to Pat Fagan. Appreciate Pat's support from Fast Shafts, and they're going to be giving away a drive shaft, and we'll have details next week. Basically, you're going to nominate your favorite driver, or you drivers yourselves can nominate. I'm not going to mention who's nominating who, so just get it in there. And then over the next week, we're going to have 6 or so drivers get pulled out, and then in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to be staging a race to take place on Artifice Speedway, so make sure you tune in for that coming up in the weeks ahead. The next couple of weeks, you'll have an opportunity. You'll get the details and the email address. There's going to be a special email address each show in order for you to nominate your driver. And you can nominate more than once per episode. Once per episode, but you can nominate on the following week as well, as there will be a random drawing that's taking place. All right, so the A-Main conversation for tonight, I had been talking with, a couple of sanctioning bodies, USMTS and IMCA, about a couple of crashes that were pretty pretty dramatic, I think. There was a Farley Speedway early on when Patrick Flanagan got T-boned, and then there was a late model crash down the front stretch at the Marshalltown Speedway that were pretty horrific if you watch them. But all of them walked away, and it was very good to see because of the driver's safety that's taken into consideration. Now, like I had mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you're just tuning in, there's tons of aspects when it comes to driver safety. There's the chassis, as we talked about, and there's also driver equipment like Hans device, head restraints, neck braces. There's fire issues with driver suit and gloves and shoes. There's also collapsible steering wheels. There's all kinds of different things. You can go on and on and on, and you can't just have a 30-second conversation about each of those. So I'm trying to narrow it down a little bit. So because of those accidents, that got me thinking about driver safety when it comes to the chassis. Now, these are the cats that I talked to. Paul Shepard, he's a builder of a chassis. Paul Berger from B&B Chassis. Jason Purvis from Voodoo Chassis. And then from the United States Modified Touring Series, the Chief Tech Inspector, Darlo Mulder. And then the President of Operations, Brett Root from IMCA, took some time to talk to me. And I grabbed some of the highlights from the conversation that we were talking about. And every one of them that I talked to said that they took the safety aspect of it very, very seriously. Darlo said that being a former chassis builder, I always studied my cars after a severe crash. I always try to examine any car that has been in a severe crash at a track I'm teching at. If the car was built to our rules, then I try to decide if a rule needs to be changed to prevent the observed failure. He also said that if he notices the car did not meet up to the tech standards, then he knows he has to increase back again teching those things, because every once in a while drivers try to slip stuff through and chassis builders try to slip stuff through. And I got a great quote coming up at the end of this conversation in just a little bit. Brett Root mentioned that IMCA frame, chassis, and those are supposed to be roll cage rules, have stood the test of time. They are well written. We are confident that if the race cars are built to these required specifications, the racers are relatively safe under the conditions of the vast majority of crashes. Hey, Cody Malakote checking in as he's finishing up with his show. Keep the good work. Hey, Cody, same with you, man. I really appreciate your efforts as well, talking with a lot of, not just dirt track racing, but a lot of racing in general. Great show. Search out Cody Malakote. Cody, go ahead and put a link in the comments to your show there. I'd really appreciate it so everyone can see it. As we continue on now, talk with Paul Berger from B&B Chassis. If one of our cars crashes hard, I want to see it. He talked about wanting to look at photos, and then if the photos kind of revealed some stuff, then he needed to see the car, then he'd work to find a way to actually be physically there to see the car and then make adjustments if needed to. I know our cars are a product of 20 years of trial and error. I personally want to make sure, that's supposed to be make sure our cars are safe, and if we had to change something, we do. Jason Purvis had a very similar conversation as far as pictures and making sure that the driver is safe before they actually have the conversation about what took place with the chassis. My ultimate goal, Jason said, is to build a safe and reliable car. I make sure driver feels very safe when he buckles in. If there is a major wreck, and after making sure the driver's okay, I ask about the car. And I noticed he made a huge emphasis. There was a longer quote that he gave me than that, but he really wanted to stress that his overall concern is driver safety, which I found very refreshing. He also wants to make sure he builds a competitive race car. And a lot of the builders that I've talked to had the exact same conversation, all of them, but Jason went to the nth degree to make sure that that was expressed. So anyway, I asked about the car, and I'm very picky about fixing or repairing cars. If the main structure is fractured or bent in right way, I'll put a car on the jig and determine if it's fixable. Paul Shepard said, if a car I built was involved in a major crash, I would evaluate the car and see if it was a fabrication issue. And if it was, make a change. If you build it really stout and the in a hurry tonight, and if it's involved in a big wreck, your car should absorb that impact instead of the racer's body. Darlo from the USMTS, or USRA, sorry. Most drivers don't take the safety of their race cars seriously enough. I feel there is a big part of my job is protecting them from themselves. And I've heard this actually from quite a few builders that I did talk to. I had a few that didn't want to be quoted, but that was one of the things that they expressed as well. I feel it is very important for a driver to know how their car is made. If a driver knew what little advantage there was for the cuts made to the safety material, I do believe they'd prefer to have a safer race car. Jason Purvis said, I started building cars after I rolled a hobby stock and the main cage came down in my head. I was okay, but I was very sore for a long time. At that point, I realized that safety was more important than anything else. So that led to one thing, to him becoming a builder. And he said he started out just putting somebody in it, ended up getting a track championship, fourth at a Super Nationals, and the rest is history as he's moved on. Brett Root talked about how they actually tech for the rules. There's a thickness of the roll bars that they use, the tubing, not only in the diameter but also the thickness of the material. And they use a sonic tester to inspect roll cages and the bar thicknesses and make sure they meet up with the requirements. It's very evident, he said, and this is a direct quote, that there are builders and racers willing to risk their safety by not following the guidelines. Recently, we had two racers that weren't allowed to race. The roll cages didn't meet our rules. Those two cars were built by, I would consider to be a very reputable and popular builders. Interesting, I thought there. Paul Berger says people really need to do some research in the car builders and their track records on safety. Not necessarily about wins, but also about safety. Just because one guy is winning doesn't mean that it is a safe race car. Paul Shepard said a lot of young racers can't afford a new car. And I thought this was a very interesting thing, as we're always talking about trying to bring new drivers into the sport and new race teams to get excited so the sport can continue. And when you're a new driver, listen to what Paul Shepard said. And they go to a cheap, and I'm not mean as an inexpensive, I mean a cheap one. They don't know what they are looking for when buying one, whether it's straight, is it, the safety aspects of it, are there good welds on it? There's a lot of junk and unsafe race cars that are out there. Paul even said, if you're looking at getting a car and you're not familiar with it, reach out to him on Facebook, Paul Shepard, and he said he'd be glad to help out and educate you on that as well. And I thought that was a great gesture. Now, Paul's probably doing business things, but at the same time, he told me he wants to just make sure guys are safe, and gals as well are safe in the cars. And finally, Jason Purvis says, I have seen so many people let me start over there. I have seen so many people do so many things that I cannot believe, from riveting fuel cell straps to not bolting bumpers. The biggest thing that drives me crazy is not running a collapse steering column. I could go on all night about safety stuff that I can't believe people do. So when you're out there and you're actually thinking about those aspects, and one of the other things, the seat compartment was another thing that a lot of the chassis builders that I did talked about, and again, I only have so much time in the element of the show, and they talked about there's some of them that'll cut a portion of it just so they can get it in, or so that drivers can get into it. And at that point, you're defeating the whole safety purpose. One chassis builder says that they drill holes in it to make it lighter. And he said that he'll fill them back up just because it's safety. Because once you start drilling holes in anything, the integrity of what that part is designed for suddenly becomes a tad bit weaker. And I can't remember who it was, but one of them says that they can't stand it when people drive or drill holes through the tubing because water can get in there and rust starts getting in there. And once again, water challenges the integrity of what that piece of equipment is there for. That is tonight's A-Main conversation. If you need more, my best suggestion is to reach out to your chassis builders. Also, the IMCA and USRA officials are very good to talk to about those as well. They want to make sure that you as a driver are safe. So if you have any questions, always reach out to either the sanctioning bodies or the chassis builder. And again, do your research. We have the right to be able to choose what we do for our fun and our entertainment, or for a living, for that matter. And this weekend is one of the weekends that we salute those that provide that opportunity for us. So I wanted to share a video because I'm very proud of the fact that we do have those freedoms. We can go where we want. And to be honest with you, we can bitch about the things we want to bitch about. As long as it's in fair taste, of course. Yelling fire in a crowded theater isn't exactly freedom of speech, and I wish some more people would realize that. Nevertheless, there are just people that do get it, that we cannot take our freedoms for granted. There are a lot of people that laid their lives down in order to protect our way of life, our choices of freedom, and this weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Although I want everybody to have fun. It is the official kickoff to summer. There's a lot of family activities, camping. Racing is a big weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And I want everyone to go out and have a great time. And Mother Nature, I'm going to get you if you don't let us race. But nevertheless, don't forget the reason why we memorialize on this weekend. Memorial Day isn't about the soldiers that we currently have, although you should say thank you for those, but it's the ones that paid the ultimate price in order to grant us those freedoms and the opportunities to have the freedom of choice. So I want to play a little video that we put together, that I put together for the radio stations I work for, Town Square Media Waterloo at K98.5 more specifically, about saluting those that we have lost.
Memorial Day is a day of ceremonies and speeches. Throughout America today, we honor the dead of our wars. We recall their valor and their sacrifices. We remember they gave their lives so that others might live. When he spoke at a ceremony at Gettysburg in 1863, President Lincoln reminded us that through their deeds, the dead had spoken more eloquently for themselves than any of the living ever could, and that we're living could only honor them by rededicating ourselves to the cause for which they so willingly gave a last full measure of devotion. Most have kept their experiences private, but most have been strengthened by their call to duty. A grateful nation opens her heart today in gratitude for their sacrifice, for their courage, and for their noble service. Let us, if we must, debate the lessons learned at some other time. Today, we simply say with pride, thank you.
So you can enjoy that as well. I want to thank everyone who tuned in for tonight's broadcast, Episode 4, tonight of Dirt Track Speedway. Episode 5 will be coming up next Wednesday night. A week from tonight, we'll do it one more time. Get out and enjoy some dirt track racing. If you want to share something that you guys did over the race weekend, either fun with family and whatnot, tag me or Dirt Track Speedway, and we'll try to share it during the heat races. We'll filter through and pick out the best ones for the night. Or for the weekend for next Wednesday, 9 o'clock. For Fast Shafts Actual Exchange, Pat Fagan, thank you. My name is Bucky Doren. This has been Dirt Track Speedway.